Hi, everybody. I'm Eugene Sepulveda. Welcome to Culturati Live. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the CEO of the Entrepreneurs Foundation, co-founder of Culturati Summit. We have three dear Culturati friends and members here with us today for the conversation. I want to tell you just a little bit about Entrepreneurs Foundation. We're based in Austin. We are founded by entrepreneurs and venture capitalists to facilitate community and employee engagement and philanthropy. Excuse me. Culturati Summit, Josh Jones-Dilworth and I and Autumn Rich started 6 years ago now, and we've been to bringing together C-suite executives, investors, some researchers and friends to explore the key components of culture. And this has evolved pretty rapidly over the last 6 years. Because of the pandemic, we've decided that rather than getting together in quarterly events, that we would sponsor Culturati Live here on Zoom monthly. And so today I'm very, very pleased to be able to welcome for At a Breaking Point, How Managers Lead. How do we empower managers to coach their teams, actively listen, and build resilience? I've got three dear friends with me today, and I don't know if everyone's screen goes on the same pattern, but to my left on the screen I'm looking at is Dr. Darren White, who's the CEO and the co-founder of Aduro, a human performance company that promotes health and well-being and performance in corporate workplaces. Dr. White brings a unique outlook to healthcare sector, combining his vast patient experience with intricacies of employee well-being. He drives greater personalization through technology and innovation. They've been an important Culturati member. And Darren, thank you for being with us. On my lower left is a dear friend, Marilyn Harris, who's the group vice president at HEB. Marilyn, I think I keep saying global vice president, but group global.
Almost.
There you go. Marilyn is a dynamic, influential leader. She's a speaker. She's an innovator. She has a passion for people. In case anyone doesn't know, HEB has about 130,000 team members. And in Texas is literally considered a first responder. Marilyn brings a unique set of solutions to business leaders. As the group vice president of talent for HEB, Marilyn provides human resources leadership for talent development and talent acquisitions teams. And last but not least is my dear friend, Professor Ethan Burris. Ethan is the Culturati Scholar. He's the department chair and professor in the management department at the University of Texas. He's also the Chevron Centennial Fellows at the McCombs School of Business. He's the director of the Center for Leadership and Ethics, and he earned his PhD in management from Cornell University and has served as a visiting scholar for Google and Microsoft. He teaches and consults on the topics of leadership, people analytics, talent insights, managing power and politics. Gosh, you've been busy lately. Building engagement in groups and teams, social enterprise, and negotiations. Thank you three for joining us. Why don't we do this? Why don't we get to know our audience a little bit? Sophia, will you bring up the poll? And audience, would you let us know who's in the room with us by completing the poll, letting us know if you're C-suite, executive, director, manager, or other. And Sophia will report these results back to us as we're underway. We were talking in the green room just before this. What a great experience it's been to get to know each other, and we were all at the last Culturati Summit, and there's been a lot of collaborations going forward since then. I know that Ethan's working with people at HEB, and Darren and Ethan and Matthew and I have been in conversations, and this is what Culturati is about. It's a group of people who share their playbooks so that we can get smarter together. You know, Marilyn, if you don't mind, we'll get a start with you. Can you just share with us some of the challenges that managers and leaders at HEB are having during this pandemic, particularly frontline managers. Oh, and
Absolutely.
I see that we have the poll results. So look, 52% of our audience is the group that we're talking about.
Excellent. Well, absolutely. As you mentioned earlier, HEB is considered a first responder. And this is, have an emergency in Texas, a hurricane is nothing new. And I think one of the main issues we had is we went into this like a dash, like we would any other traditional emergency operation. If you think back when COVID first hit, and it really hit us around March, we thought, okay, this is going to last a few weeks. We're going to do some things differently. We're going to hit it hard, and then we're going to move on and get back to normalcy. And that was over 6 months ago. And I think one of the biggest challenges is we went into it like a sprint. We went into like this was a dash, that we were going to get through it, hunker down. People work 7 days a week, 15-hour days, and then we'll get through it and get a break. Well, finally, we realized this is an ultra marathon. Of course, as you all know, we're in the middle of this now. We're not looking at coming out of anything probably till earliest, maybe summer of next year. And that's a very different way of working, of how you pace your work and continue to get things done. So, we dropped a lot of our regular work in efforts of this big emergency. And then we have to realize, how do you continue through the emergency, but pick up your run the business work at the same time? That was very, very different. So we had to completely learn different ways of getting work done, some virtual in some areas, which was a huge shift. In my new role, I'm moved to San Antonio, but prior I was in Houston for 16 years. I literally flew to San Antonio 2 to 3 times a week, every week when I lived in Houston, because everything had to be face to face. Everything was so critical. We had to have these touch points. And now to see, we've been working from home, at least in the corporate area, for months now, and with once again with no real end in sight, because we're not going to push that. And we found a way to get it done. It's remarkable. The things that we thought could never happen over Zoom, some of the sensitive conversations and very difficult things, we've been able to get done. That's been extremely difficult. And then for us, when we look at the timeline of everything that's happened this year, COVID hit us really hard in March, and then in May with the murder of George Floyd, that really hit us hard with all of the social injustice. And quite frankly, that was like another emergency level event that was happening in our communities that we really had to look for it. So all of the things dealing with that, and of course, we're still working through that and revamping some of our plans around diversity, equity, and inclusion at HEB. But that coupled with everything with COVID has really made this year unprecedented in a lot of ways. And by the way, yes, we did still have hurricanes that came through Texas, and we still had to be a first responder with that. So I could say this has been the perfect storm with everything possible hitting, and then quite frankly, some things that we have never dealt with before. So that's some of the major challenges that our leaders have been dealing with and are still dealing with.
And so frontline managers, I guess particularly at HEB, you have a group where the frontline managers are still very physical with their staff because it's in the stores.
Yep.
But then you also have a large corporate group that I assume is working remotely.
For the most part, we're encouraging everyone who can work from home to work from home. There's a variety of reasons for that. Of course, we have lots of parents who are now embarking upon homeschooling, which is a different level of complexity. But you're right, the people in our manufacturing and our warehouse and transportation operations and store operations, they have to go to work. They have to physically be there to get the work done. Anyone that doesn't have to be, we're encouraging them to stay at home.
So unique challenges for the managers who are working from home and their team members working from home include
Absolutely.
what? And Darren and Ethan, y'all weigh in here. But Marilyn, what are you seeing?
There is, and I don't think it'd probably be any surprise to anyone on this call, a huge emphasis on, being a life coach for your partners. They are dealing, and of course, we call everybody at HB partners. So I try to say employees, but partners is automatically going to slip out. So all of our employees are called partners, but there's being a huge life coach and really watching for that health and wellness aspects of people's lives. And I think It hits every stream. It hits the parents, it hits single people, it hits married people, and it's all interconnected because HEB, we've been very fortunate to continue to grow our sales, and our industry is, doing very well during this period of time. However, you could be married to someone who was laid off. You could have children who are at home, and there's a lot around really depression, loneliness, that lack of connectiveness that our leaders are having to get involved with and be very intentional about talking about these issues, making them okay to talk about, and sharing some of their personal experiences. And I think that's because for a lot of folks, work is an outlet. It's where our social connectivity. We go to lunch with people at work. We talk about personal things and work things, and it is extremely different. And weren't able to ramp up into this. It just boom. It happened one day, and no one was necessarily prepared for it. And thinking that it was going to be a short time thing, and now it's gone on for several months. We've had to get much more adept at how to continue those social interactions that are important for people's health and wellness and social well-being, and seeing that as a true measure of how a leader can keep the engagement of their team by focusing on those things just as much as focusing on how are we going to get the work done.
I love how you articulated life coach in that, and I wonder, when you're looking at your managers and even maybe toward the leadership level too, is there any sense of reluctance to be more of a broader life coach, or are people excited to be able to dig in further and feel like they're helping more? Just knowing that, previously pre-COVID, there was a little bit of a separation between, life and work. Obviously, digital transformation narrowing that, but just wondering, is there any reluctance, or are they excited to play a bigger, deeper role?
To be totally candid, I think it's on different people on different spectrums of it. So there's a bigger push of people saying, I see that there's something not right with my partners. How can I help them? One of the things I'm really proud of that we did, we rolled out this HEB Cares program. So we kind of branded it HEB Cares, and we've had some of the top senior leaders of HEB create small video vignettes that play for any partner at any level to see. And they are talking about their struggles with depression, their personal struggles with depression, and how this pandemic has really emphasized that, or with their children. So we're trying to to take some of the stigmatism away of the issues that could have by having senior leaders talk about it. And I think there's been a great openness to discuss this, to talk about it, to help people, and to provide tools. So we've had a lot of our leaders come and say, what can I do to help this partner? What are the things that we can provide? And so we're pouring those out. However, I will say conversely, on the other side, with everything around the social injustice and unrest in our country, that one people have felt more reluctant to jump into. Right. It is these are two totally different things, right? Happening at the same time. People feel pretty comfortable with jumping in with the health and wellness, and however, people are struggling a little bit with how to have those conversations and not wanting to say the wrong thing.
Marilyn, I want to come back around, but I'm going to get Ethan right now, but then I want to come back around and find out. I mean, HEB leads in training and development is one of Texas corporations, but were your frontline managers equipped to be life coaches, or have you had to speed up and catch up? But you prompted something that Ethan and I were talking about, I think by email yesterday, Ethan, which, you reminded me, we're not in a crisis. We're not in two crises. So Ethan, frame where we are a little bit for us from your perspective.
We're in a lot of crises. So as I was listening to Marilyn talk, so quickly we started with the pandemic. So COVID has hit, that's caused massive changes all around. But we have the murder of George Floyd, which is not an isolated incident. So there's massive racial and social unrest. There's economic crises that has happened as a result of COVID for a lot of companies. So HEB is a little bit unique because everyone still has to eat. And so, the business model of grocery store chains are different from some others. And so a lot of other companies are going to have to navigate the economic pressures of trying to maintain their business in this type of environment where customers aren't visiting as frequently as the past. There's work life and home life, as we've already talked about. So um, right now, we're actually doing road school. So we're in the foothills of the Ozarks. Visiting my wife's family, since we're not going home for the holidays this year. You know, that's something that's very different. I taught yesterday, and we're on a farm and there's cows outside. I've never taught a class in my life in that type of circumstance. And so, you know, it's sort of forced.
Well, don't forget the political crisis, right? I mean, this screen, yeah.
And then we have a fifth crisis with the election coming around in a week.
Right.
So there's no less than 5 crises that are happening all at once. And so when we talk about equipping our managers for dealing with that, it's not just equipping them with tools to handle some of the kind of HR processes of how to work from home and some of the resources that you need with the second screen and all.
Right.
It's being a life coach across these really varied venues of life. And so one of the interesting pieces of research I've seen just over the last couple of months is that since COVID has started in March, employees on a whole feel more powerlessness, that is loss of control over the office. We're sort of forced into this, you know, where your life is on a screen for everyone to see.
I think you're on mute,
Eugene,
Eugene.
I think
Sorry.
you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you, Ethan. You know, I also talk about, you know, we always know the importance of trust as management, as just the employer, and the difficulty of maintaining trust, particularly in a remote environment. What is the literature, what is the research showing us about this right now, Ethan?
Well, I'll just kind of piggyback with the study I just mentioned. So that loss of power, or that feeling of control for employees, that does a number of things. First, without as much contact or the same type of communications that they've had in the past, that gives a lot of opportunities for employees to kind of make up things as far as what's going on within the organization. And so by providing more communications, you can actually increase the amount of trust that employees have with the organization at large. But I think the second part of trust starts to bleed beyond just what's going on within the organization, or are we going to survive? And that's sort of trusting your manager, that your manager will look out for you, that they will care for some of these other parts of your life that are really upended and have a lot less to do with the tasks at hand and the work that needs to get done, and more simply with navigating a lot of the challenges that life presents itself right now.
Yeah, I'm reminded as we're talking about our employees, trusting that we'll be looking after them. Lori Knowlton, who's the CHRO at Silicon Labs and on my board, in one of our stories, in one of our conversations, she said, look, you know, pre-COVID, pre-remote working place, if you didn't hear from somebody, you knew everything was okay. They're in their office, they're down there, they can pop around. Right now, if we're not hearing from them, we might need to assume that something's wrong and be much more proactive to be able to reach them. Hey, Darren, let's pop over to you. I know you work with a lot of national and regional clients. What are you hearing and seeing among your clients right now?
Yeah, it's a lot of the similar themes that both Ethan and Marilyn have been talking about. I think the biggest thing is this is a cascading set of crises. So just as you begin to wrap your brain around the crises, another one rolls in. On top of that, we're collapsing, you know, work and life. Like, you know, we went from work-life balance several years ago to work-life integration with digital transformation, and now it's just work-life. They overlap each other, and I think that provides challenges. Not to add to crises, but I would suggest there's maybe a sixth one, which is an information crisis. And I think that as we're trying to wrap our brains around what's happening and provide support for employees, information is conflicted coming from some of our most reputable institutions. And then you project that against the backdrop of the election, and we now polarize those messages. And so managers are in a very unique place where they have to, cross these, be able to communicate these things to all different types of people and backgrounds and thinking. So I think that's really made it really tough. And then and then just to add the crescendo on that, you're right, people are at home and we're disconnected and we have less of a pulse on what's going on. And I would say two major themes have kind of evolved out of that. First and foremost, the need for managers to have a way to articulate, converse, dialogue, route people around things with mental health and cognitive performance. We have very little time between meetings, and we're no more commute times or what I call in-between moments where those became my meditative processing moments. Those are gone. And so we're really seeing a big push on the mental health side. And I'm not quite convinced that managers are equipped and to deal with that. The second thing is kind of back to Marilyn's point about life coach. In fact, I've never used that term before, but I love it. We always talk about, managers, need to be a good coach. And when you're a good coach, you're not just helping people with the recipe of things they need to do for work, but you're actually looking at their mindset and their environment and other things. And so it's so important for managers to really understand how to look at the whole person that came to work rather than the work person that came to work. And I think that our employers are looking for resources that are really supporting them to be that. I think top-down communication is good, but there's so many questions and dialogue that people need to process. It's impossible to have it just top-down communication. There needs to be lateral, peer-to-peer, colleague-to-colleague, manager-to-peer conversations. I mean,
Darren, you're making me realize, as a lot of industries are looking and saying, "Oh my gosh, this has just accelerated the development of technology that was already underway." I had never thought about what this is doing inside of our companies to our performance and human management, but it's really accelerating some trends that we had going on. That number one, welcoming the full authentic self to the workplace. Where I'm on Zoom, where kids are on people's laps, and I think that's great. And where people are saying, "Excuse me, I have to go take care of this in a moment." But also where what you were just talking about, how we've got to build the infrastructure to deal with issues that wouldn't have gotten any visibility in the workplace in the past.
I mean, that's correct. I mean, there's lots of things that are, getting accelerated in this pandemic. And from a tool perspective, managers just lost the tool of the water cooler, right? And the hallway chatter. And you were able to keep a pulse on people's mental health and work health just by simply, running into them in the hallway. We don't have that anymore. And then you back that against, Zoom meetings, a tip, it's just, we shouldn't be having hour-long meetings. I don't know where hour-long meetings came from to begin with. They're just, everybody has an hour-long meeting, but they should be 50 minutes or 25 minutes if it's a half-hour meeting, and allow people, it's amazing. Parkinson's law, you'll actually get the same amount of work done. We were fooled into thinking we need a full hour to do it. And I think so we need new tools and infrastructure to be able to listen, give people space at home to think and process, but then also listen and account for the water cooler moments. And Marilyn also said another important thing: work is an outlet. There's many outlets we don't have anymore. We're not out at doing a lot of things socially anymore. We're disconnected from families, and families that may even be sick. And so all these outlets are gone for people, and they're in a house, caring for children and maybe elderly and trying to process all these 6 crises. And so the infrastructure is so important right now for listening.
That you, and I'm going to come back because I want, to the extent that you're able to share some of the stories from some of your clients, Darren, I'd love you to do that. But you've prompted me to ask Marilyn and Ethan, what infrastructure development to support frontline managers are you guys seeing under development in response to where we find ourselves?
And it may vary depending upon if the frontline, for my response, if the frontline manager is someone who's still working with their
Sure.
partners every day versus virtually. I will say one thing I thought about when Darren was talking about the Zoom, there is a setting in Outlook that we are started to employ where all your meetings will automatically default to 50 minutes if it's an hour or 25 minutes. And that was probably the first part of the burnout. We had to have, and this was something we did. I think you asked earlier, had we equipped our leaders? No, our leaders were not equipped for this, and we still are coming up with solutions to the problems that have come from this because it was something that actually had never prepared for. So some of the things are you have to be able to take time out from, and this goes back to the analogy I'm giving, the sprint versus the marathon. When you're in a sprint, everyone puts their head down, you give it 100% for a month, and then you get back. This is not that. So we've had to force people, and I say it in that way, to take the time out to, we're not going to talk about work every time we have a Zoom. We're not going to talk about work and we're going to ask about people's children. We're going to ask about people, and those things came naturally through, like you said, the water cooler work. Or I'm pretty old. I'm way back in the old ages where they had I don't know if you remember the book about Manage by Walking Around. That was a really big thing. I came up in that era where you kind of walked around, and all that is completely gone, right? So what is it that we can institute into our practices that is the same thing as managers walking around? Just that chit chat conversation that we're not going to talk about work, to get into how people are feeling, because that is greatly lacking. And back to what Darren said, for a while, the Zoom calls were literally 10 hours a day. No breaks. People have to say, I have to go to the bathroom now. I'll be right back while they're on the Zoom, and I'm eating my lunch. So I'm going through there. So we're working with the leaders to say, first of all, it's okay to not have a Zoom for everything and not have a subject for every Zoom. It's okay to have happy hour with your team over Zoom. You know what I mean? That was something that people used to do on the down low. Now we're saying it's okay because you're at home. You're not going to be driving. No one's going to have all the sexual harassment issues that we might get into because you're going to be on Zoom. But this is a way to have an outlet. So we're actually putting together a whole toolkit for leaders now of what they can do in facilities and on Zoom to build the team building with social distancing, with all the things that we have to do now. And people are starving for that. Have we figured it out yet? No, I think we're still brainstorming. We're having teams of people who are working on it to give us ideas. But I think the connection and the interconnectedness is almost taking precedence over the work that needs to get done. Because, and it wasn't like that in the beginning. I'm saying this is an evolution where you come to realize that stuff will harm a culture and the productivity of a company much more deeply than at first the fear was. And I think it's the elephant in the room that we haven't mentioned yet, is there are a lot of frontline leaders who felt like, if my people are working from home, they're not working. Like this whole thing, when you're working from home, if I can't see you, if I can't touch you, you must be goofing off, watching TV or doing something other. That was kind of the first evolution of the issue. I think people have kind of worked through that and gotten through it. And now it's like, I'm concerned about the well-being of my partners. And that's because our partners are also verbalizing it a lot more. And the leaders themselves personally are feeling those exact same challenges. So it just permeates through everything.
Well, and look at us. I don't know who's the youngest among us, but we're not millennials. And we think about our frontline workers. There's a lot of observation and improvisation that we can make and do because we've been through at least different stages and maybe have raised children but wow, often our frontline managers are first-time managers, and they're young and they don't have the experience to default back to. Though I certainly learned, and Ethan, you would be better at this than I, when I was teaching millennials, when I was teaching in the undergraduates, oh my God, their improvisation was extraordinary. So maybe there's a lot to learn from them at the same time. What are you seeing in this space, Ethan?
Just to kind of reiterate a couple of things. The first and number one question I get is, it has nothing to do with like the tools to do the job. So how to do performance management in this type of environment. It has more to do with kind of cultural maintenance. So how do you replace those water cooler conversations?
Yeah.
Going back to the managed by walking around, managed by emailing around is not the same.
Right.
So for those frontline managers, being more purposeful about how they build and maintain the culture that they want. That's something that we've had to talk a lot with certainly our students and a number of executives about. I think when you're in person and pre-COVID, the culture kind of took on a life of its own, and you could let a lot of people work on the culture all at the same time. But since we are now all separated, and you only come together for team meetings in a finite amount of time, whether they be 50 or 60 minutes, you have to plan those out in a way and plan what type of interaction you want. I don't know how much of happy hours were always planned that far in advance, but they could be. That's great. But when you're together, it's a lot more organic than what it is now. And so I think that's also been one of the hurdles, is how to come up with some of those water cooler conversations in an authentic way that still somewhat mimics what's going on, or what has been going on before. So just a couple tools that I've seen. One is to start out a lot of meetings with the first 10 minutes, send people into breakout rooms that are small, 2 or 3 people each. No agenda, no nothing, just talk as people first before we come back and get down to business and the work that we need to do. And the second that I've seen is the impromptu Zoom meetings. In 10 minutes, I'm gonna go on lunch. So I'll just send a note out to the rest of my team. Hey, if anyone wants to grab a bite to eat, here's my Zoom link. I'll be on there for the next half hour. Please join in. And so you get that type of spontaneity that kind of mimics that, the water cooler conversations from the old days without it being quite so purposeful.
I'm seeing on the chat, Jamie Martinez is noting that he's encouraging managers, and he's taking walks with people. So I guess you can do socially distant walks when you're in the same, in the same community. And no big surprise. My friend Billy Wilkinson is talking about how he can be more productive if he'll remember to exercise and take care of himself. And then also is pretty unambiguous about, turning off when he has to take care of his kids. Darren, you've probably seen as much, if not more, of this with some of your clients. What can you share?
Yeah, I think going back to the mental health piece at Levi Strauss, their main issue right now, and actually, what Kathy's mission before this was mental health, and I feel like what COVID specifically has done to this, maybe even the combination of all these crises, is people has felt actually more comfortable talking about these things. They're almost like, I don't need to hide it anymore. Like, the world's suffering, it's okay for me to share that I'm suffering. And so in some cases, it's actually made that road a little bit better. And I think one of the most powerful things, and again, Marilyn mentioned this in her second response, which is having leadership show vulnerability and share their struggles and how they got through it. It normalizes it. And so people, again, with the trend of people already feeling better about talking about it, when they begin to see it in all levels of leadership throughout the company, it just becomes a better thing. I think that's probably the biggest thing that we're seeing on the mental health front. On the other side of the coin, we have the social equity, and we talked earlier that that's the less comfortable thing to talk about. I would say we're most challenged there too. And we're seeing it most challenged in our clients, where the you know, I've just finished up 9 hours of DEI training, and I've considered myself to be, you know, sort of read on the concepts, but I had no idea, and I'm now realizing I'm this much of knowledge, and there's so much more to go, and so you can imagine what it takes to get that information down to frontline managers and be able to talk about these things without being scared. And I think there's not enough tools and there's not enough things out there to help support those. So that's the other piece of it. And then just lastly, I would say, when you collapse work and life, people are struggling to, is it okay for my personal life to intervene in my work life? And I would say a year ago, if a child popped onto the video once, it probably was okay, but 2 or 3 times it may have been a distraction. I can tell you now, like, children pop into videos all the time. It's a complete celebration. It's a complete celebration. And so we're just seeing the humanity in people through all of this. And it gives me, great hope that we can all be human. And a concept we've been learning inside is learning in public, or learning in community. Like, let's learn out loud, and it's okay. So those are some of the things that we're seeing at that level.
2 things pop up. One, for the audience, if we haven't brought up a challenge that you as a frontline worker, or you as a manager of other frontline managers face, just list it in the chat. But I was going to say fun fact, it may not be the right word. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this statistic, but it's just emerging right now, really, in the political world. 70% of Latinos do not consider themselves people of color. And I think that has huge implications for conversations about DE&I. It certainly does and it certainly explains so much in some of the political progressives, liberals. If you're Hispanic and you're progressive and liberal, you probably do. But it explains to me why I'm having trouble communicating with other Latinos who are not progressive and liberal. So that just aside, we've talked a lot about mental health and wellness. Those frontline managers who may be less seasoned than many others, how do they recognize mental health issues? And are we setting up like hotlines for them to then come and check with other experience, maybe with HR groups or someone else, on what are they seeing and how they might respond? Marilyn, as the person with 130,000 partners, how do you guys deal with that?
So I will say this is something that we're continuing to grow in, but yes, we do have a hotline that calls ourselves HR Answers. And so any partner, doesn't not just a frontline manager, can type in a question, a concern. We do want them to go to HR. We've also hired several on-site, I'm calling them on-site, but it's virtual now, counselors and professional psychologists to help just our leaders. Because even before this happened, we were seeing an uptick in even suicides. That was what prompted us to do this. We were just seeing an uptick in suicide and suicide attempts. And leaders, if you have someone that works for you that commits suicide, it rocks your world. And so when something like that would happen, what can we do? And so we had been doing a lot of training on the signs of depression, but it was more around, suicidal thoughts, because we were trying to prevent that. Now that's just really grown into, how do you see it in your children? Because many people are having issues with their children. They're having some mental health issues because of everything, their spouse, and of course themselves. And so we have a hotline, we have the online counselors, we have counselors for leaders only to help them with their partners. And then of course, all partners have at least 6 free counseling sessions that they can go to see any counselor they want to, for 6 times for free. And then of course, after that, it'll be a deductible, to encourage people to seek the help. And then our EAP, of course, has lots and lots of webinars and videos and, literature around what to do about certain things. We are still working through, though, how to equip that frontline manager, because that's the largest number of managers you have too. Your organization is like a
Right.
pyramid. So most of the managers are at that level. And just like you said, they're new, but they're also in the same age bracket of a lot of the people that report to them. And so they are having the same life issues and that same life stage as a lot of the people that report to them. So I think, and they're at a different generation where they're more free to talk about it. And so this has been a major conversation with that frontline manager. I don't think we've done enough. I think we're on the right track to continue to improve upon that.
If I can build on that just for a second,
Please.
I think what's striking to me about Marilyn's story there is just the number of ways that HEB is reach. So not just relying on the front manager, it's Ask HR. There's source, there's there's lots of different avenues, and listen to them in a number of ways. And so to think about those strategies as not just a one shot kind of check the box, here's our training for frontline managers, now we know what's going on, but more of an ecosystem to try and understand what the challenges that employees are facing, whether it be mental health, physical health, children and family life, resources to work from home, whatever. What are those different avenues that you are actively seeking out to understand that employee experience now that you have less of an opportunity to observe them, and then providing those avenues in a central place to make sense of those data so that you can then act. But if you just take one shot at it, it's typically not enough.
Darren, I promise I wasn't intending to give you a commercial, but I do want to go to the technology and the tools that are out there. So you can talk about Aduro's platform, but talk more broadly about what tools technology is bringing to us, to enterprises to help manage all these challenges.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, a lot of this, so I'll just give you our product framework, but it doesn't really apply just to Aduro. It's really about all the things in the market. Right. I think there's a common theme. So we call it LEAP, LEAP, and it basically just stands for listen, engage, activate, and then predict. And so there's plenty of tools that you can get your hands on around listening. And I think it's really important to be doing both, active listening and passive listening. So active listening, might be a dialogue or a conversation. It might be asking somebody to fill out a survey. Those things are active. Increasingly more important are, passive listening, where we're taking in, you mentioned Microsoft Teams earlier in the conversation. They're actually analyzing our emails. They're providing sentiment analysis, and we're able to get feedback about, what's the sentiment of our employees or certain teams. And so that's passive listening. We need to do more of that, and technology is certainly pushing in that way. On that front, we analyze, our coaching calls through natural language processing to, we were talking about this in the green room before, to really get a sense of, like, listening to an hour-long dialogue with a coach is very different than somebody filling out a survey. And a lot more information can be revealed there about what's really behind the problem. That's the problem. And so that's the listening. Then we've got to engage people. We got to capture attention. We have to be able to create the ecosystem that Ethan and Marilyn were just talking about, of opportunities for people to raise their hand, either anonymously or otherwise. And that's not enough. We have to actually activate. So this now should turn into a dialogue, either with a manager or a dialogue with a coach or a dialogue with the EAP, or even maybe back to their provider. We have to be able to route these people to the proper resource. Then lastly, we are sitting on a mass amount of data. And so the P in predictability is really about how do we take the data and begin to prevent these things in the future, or be able to catch them quicker and have automated things in response for that. And I believe, I think that's where technology is going, and certainly where we're focused is on that kind of LEAP framework where we're able to respond in real time, and begin to predict some of these things and get the resources people need at all levels, at the individual contributor, manager, leader, executive levels.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we go into Q&A from the audience, but then I'll leave 2.5 minutes for each person to finish up with some thoughts that you might have to close. One of the questions that immediately I see here is, do we have any concerns about inadvertently pushing managers into therapist roles? I worry about them given unqualified guidance.
I mean, I can start on that. That's
Sure,
our
Darren.
business. So, yeah, there's very careful lines, right? So, we started 12 years ago as a coaching company, and it was health coaching. And so having a framework where, listen, these are the lines of coaching, and this is the line for treatment. And we don't do treatment, we refer to treatment. And so that same level of guidance can be, should be given when we're teaching people to be a coach or a mentor. Specifically, we're inside of really good mentor training and coach training. That's one of the bedrock pieces of that training, is to make sure you're not crossing that line and you're not providing, medical advice or treatment of any kind. And so there's lots of ways to make sure that happens. And then even just knowing where to refer, right? So it's one thing to know the line, but you can't just say, hey, that's not for me, go find help. You have to be able to say, listen, I think that makes sense that you connect with our EAP and get, further dialogue with the EAP, and they may actually refer you on to a provider, for example. So it's really important not to just, show up as a life coach one day, and really go through the necessary training. And by the way, you'll learn a lot about yourself and a lot about how to motivate others. There's a lot of benefits in learning how to be a coach. So, but that is the bedrock of good formal training.
Marilyn, Ethan, anything to add to that?
Actually, that question came up from some leaders at HEB, like, are you expecting us to be people's therapists? Are you expecting? And so really had to talk about, it's more about the active listening and not ignoring signals. So most of the time when something happened that went awry, the leader could say, I noticed that Malin was acting differently last week, but I didn't want to get into it, or I didn't want to, cross the line. So I let it go and I ignored it. Most of the things that people that we're asking them to do are things that they already noticed. And instead of ignoring it, just say, is everything okay? I mean, you don't have to be you don't have to have the answer. You just have to recognize, and people just asking someone, are you okay? You look maybe a little off today. Is everything going okay? Is anything I can help you with? You would be surprised just by asking that one question. And that is what we're asking people to do. We're asking them, don't ignore things that may seem off with someone that you know. And then ask the question, but then that's really all you have to do. There's HR that can help you. There's the EAP that can help you. There's different places that you can refer someone to. But as that frontline manager, you may be the only person that recognizes there's something different and no one else sees that person. So it's more about just caring about people as a person. It doesn't have to even be about therapy. It could just be like, I care about you as a person that works with me. It seems like you're down or you're off or something. And it's okay to say that. They say, no, I'm totally fine. Okay. It just seemed like you seemed a little off today and you normally, this way. So cool. I'm glad everything's going great. But the fact that you asked, you'd be surprised. It means the world to people that you even noticed it. And I think it's not the therapist, it's just that one little intervention of saying it and then getting them to help with someone who really is trained to help them in whatever it is they may need.
You're reminding me that again, Lori Knowlton from Silicon Labs said having a robust referral database was critical, so that people very quickly said, oh, maybe you want to call here, or let me introduce you to so-and-so. I've got a question that we've talked about, but people are wanting the answers. Now that we're working from home with no commute, when do you take time to reflect about your day? So Ethan, what about yourself?
Oh man. So I do that best in the morning. I don't know about y'all, but by the time I get to the end of the day at night, and then the second shift starts immediately afterwards with the kids, like I'm spent. So I try and develop a habit of doing those reflections in the morning before my day starts. But that's just me. I'm kind of reminded of a book by Cal Newport. It's called Deep Work, and he makes an argument around uh, different types of work. So there's the deep, which is incredibly valuable stuff that you do. More shallow work is if you've ever been incredibly busy all day long but felt like you haven't accomplished anything, that is shallow work. And so he goes through a number of different techniques and tools to recommend for how to organize your time to make sure that you devote it towards uh, and carve out time for the deep work. So it's a wonderful book that, at least for me, is helpful in analyzing and then carving out that time.
Ethan, would you say the name of the book again, please? You broke up a little bit.
I'm sorry. It's called Deep Work, and it's by Cal Newport, who's a professor in computer science at Georgetown.
Fantastic. Good. Thank you. But Marilyn, Darren, what about yourselves? When do you get time to reflect?
Well, I personally am a morning person. I think it depends on where you get your energy from, and I schedule it on the calendar where I can say, because otherwise something else will happen. I have to make it very, very intentional. Or if I'm not saying this all the time, but get the opportunity to get on a treadmill or someplace and I can completely break away and I'm focused on something. Uh, I have to be intentional about it though, and I can't say that I've been the best throughout all of this, but that's why I try to do it.
I think I break it into two categories: decompression and reflection. And embarrassingly, I'm hoping none of my team is on this call, but my reflection time is actually extended showers and in the morning, and then at nighttime I like a bath. And a little embarrassing, but that's where I spend most of my time in deep thought. And decompression for me is doing things that require full attention. You can't. So I love to mountain bike and I love to alpine ski, and both of those require 100% attention, and that decompresses me almost instantly, because if you do rattle the day through your head, you will be injured. And so it kind of forces you to really truly disconnect and kind of rebuild.
I'll just add in here a practice that freestyle writing, whether by longhand or just on your computer, writing 1,500 words that just come out of you, may also be a practice that people want to do. So unfortunately, I didn't reserve as much time as I want, but I've got 1 minute for each of you. Final thoughts on the topic. Why don't we start with Marilyn?
I guess I'll wrap it up by saying, have grace and mercy for yourself and for your team members. We're incredibly hard on ourselves, and our team members are also incredibly hard on themselves. And so, if I just try to think throughout the day, I'm going to give myself grace, and I'm going to give my team grace. And I think if we did that, it's going to help us get through these difficult times.
Love that. Ethan?
So for me, I guess I'm reminded of an old Gallup study. They did attributes that most employees look for in their frontline managers. And it's relatively simple stuff: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And all the stuff around being kind of a clinical life coach and providing all these resources and stuff, there's a lot of complexities involved. But I think if you break things down to, what am I giving my employees to make them trust me more, to give them compassion for where they are, to provide some sense of stability that things are going to be okay, and hope for a better future that we're going to get through all this, then all the things start to get a lot more simple.
Cool. Thank you. Dr. White?
Yeah, I have a lot of hope, and I see a lot of really cool outcomes here. I mean, Americans are resilient, and I've the benefit of growing up in 3 different countries, and never more have I been more proud to live in such a great country. So we've just been through multiple crises, and I know we'll get through this. And when we do, two things are going to emerge. Number one is I feel like companies, rather than maybe state, local government, and other entities, I think companies and communities within the companies are going to lead the charge here and really step up and be a North Star for people. And I think leaders, I think as we go through, these 6 crises, we're going to develop into incredible leaders, either individually or whether we're going to lead a team. And I'm not sure, I would say statistically, we're probably never going to see this collision of crises at once again. And so it builds resilience for a really long time looking forward. So that I'm excited about. And lastly, just on a personal level, I feel like 2 other things are going to come out of this. One is we will normalize the conversation around mental health. And I believe it'll be embraced, and it'll be a performance conversation about how you can be great at anything. And lastly, I also think that there's a growth and development opportunity here that'll get democratized as well. As we move into this digital remote world and we have to listen better beyond water cooler conversations, which has actually created some structures that maybe aren't so great. And so I'm excited that I think people will have equal opportunity to grow and develop out of all of this. So I'm really inspired for the future, and know that we'll come out of this a lot better than we entered it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, great wrap ups from each of you. And you know what, I would wrap them all around that we now have not only permission to care, but we have perfect examples and great emphasis on the need to care as a demonstrable management tool that impacts performance. And as we were talking earlier, the rapid evolution of management practices that were underway, whether we go back from remote, I think we'll always be a little bit more remote than we've been in the past, that allow us to manage families and our own needs. So to the audience, thank you guys for being with us. This is the 4th Culturati Live. We'll be announcing the 5th Culturati Live in November quite soon. We're wrapping up some details. I'll also be sending everyone who ever attended Culturati Summit. And Sophia, this is reminding me, maybe anyone that's attended a Culturati Live, we'll be sending next week information on the plans for Culturati 2021, which at this point includes a lot of questions. What are your pain points? What are the evolutions that you're seeing? And what do you want to be talking about? Obviously, we'll be talking about a virtual Culturati Summit. Frankly, we're looking at April 6th, 7th, and 8th. We have a few hours each of the days, and we have you decide what you want to plug into. But we'll be talking more about that. Darren, Marilyn, Ethan, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
be safe. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.